Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Break the Rules livestream. I'm your host, Lev Polyakov at Lev Po on X, and we are here today for a debate about whether or not Donald Trump is going the authoritarian dictatorial route with the recent arrests of certain activists that have been going on, among other things. And I want to thank Styx Hexenhammer 666 for being back here. Yar, matey, with the pirate hat, only missing that beautiful owl on his shoulder. And of course, the great and powerful Counterpoints Connor, veteran, Florida man, family man, all around wonderful guy. We are going to be talking about this possible descent into tyranny in the United States. But first, I want to start off with a very short introduction to one of the things that I see possibly leaning into this whole thing. And once again, everybody smash that subscribe button, smash that like button, click the bell. The bell is extremely important. And for all the people who are watching this on X Spaces, go into the Jumbotron. That's the YouTube link. Go into YouTube. I want to funnel everybody into YouTube. That's the main place for BTR. Anyway, here's the intro. Ksenia Petrova, a 30-year-old Russian bioinformatician at Harvard, got detained at Boston Logan Airport on February 16, 2025, coming back from France with some undeclared frog embryos in her research. You'd think a 500 fine would settle a minor custom slip like that, right? Nope. Her J-1 visa got rejected, and she's been stuck in ICE custody for over 6 weeks facing deportation. Her attorney's calling it an overreach. She's no threat, and she's terrified of going back to Russia because of her anti-Putin stance. And now there's even a GoFundMe for her at around $29,000 currently. Now, immigration debates usually get heated about cultural incompatibility. So, for example, Middle Eastern refugees, Central American migrants, all of that. But Petrova, she's a scientist. She's a Russian dissident. She fits right into American values. This isn't some culture clash. Like, it's a system that, in my opinion, has lost its grip on proportion, wrecking her life and her research over a paperwork flub. It's short-sighted. This power trip could ship her back to persecution, hand Putin the win, and make America look like it's ditching its reputation as a safe haven. And it's not just her. Trump's been cracking down on the pro-Gaza student protests as well, revoking visas left and right, which brings me to this. Thomas Jefferson probably would have had more in common with Charles Martel than Ilhan Omar. So Martel, for those of you who don't know, he was the Frankish guy who stopped the Muslim advance at Tours in 732, and he was all about defending Western sovereignty against an ideology like Islam is today. So I think that Thomas Jefferson would have tipped his hat towards the guy, because that would have been more like protecting the groundwork of liberty. And when it comes to what's going on right now, we don't yet have a law that maybe somebody like Thomas Jefferson would approve of, where maybe Islam wouldn't really be compatible with American secular liberty. But as far as what's going on with her today, somebody who I think is totally compatible to be in the United States, that to me is much more of a overreach. So the question here is, can we set the kind of system up where everything is done according to the letter of the law, so the law itself does not get abused by people who, let's say somebody starts to say negative things about Trump in the future, well, they could also be deported because now the law doesn't even matter. That's not a scenario I want to see, but at the same time, I can understand where certain deportations of this nature are coming from. That's my view. I want to bring it over to you guys, and let's start with Styx. What do you think about Petrova, and what do you think about this deportation scenario with these Gazan activists?
I think that deportations should start at the top and then work their way down to some arbitrary point. So, first you focus on people who are known cartel members, they're militants, they're actively encouraging or funding terrorism, things like that. And this is what we were promised. And I am slightly concerned about certain instances of people that have done nothing else particularly wrong actually being deported or slated for possible deportation simply because they're illegally in the country. If they've been seeking a degree, they've done nothing else wrong, and so forth, those should be the lowest priority. I would say, though, if you come to the country illegally, you have come to the country illegally. And in the end, you can be deported because you're already breaking the law just by physically being here. And so I don't really think as much about that, so to speak. I think that Donald Trump generally has been, if not a libertarian president, at least more a classically liberal president than we've seen in some time. We have the 10-to-1 regulation scaling, of course. We have the large scale firings within multiple federal bureaus, and so forth. What I would ask principled libertarians, of which I am one, a question here. What more do you want from him? Within the legal framework that is presented to Donald Trump, how much more can he actually physically do in short order? He's only been in office for a few months. Give him time. I'm willing to give time and credence to him because I understand that despite claims to the contrary, he's not actually God Emperor Trump, of course. He has to operate within a certain legal framework. That legal framework can be shifted over time, it can be changed over time, but ultimately it takes a lot of time to actually do that. And so if you want, something more closely approximating a classically liberal approach, it's going to take him literally years.
Connor, what say you? Could we maybe give a little bit more time for Trump to settle into the kind of classically liberal approach we want to see, or have things already gone haywire?
I appreciate Styx having a little bit more of a sober take than the one I'm used to on Twitter. However, his charity, I do not extend. And I don't think Styx is necessarily going to disagree with these things, but I would still like to point them out nonetheless. So there are 3 cases that I know of involving Venezuelans. So Frangel Reyes Mota, Neri Alvarado, Jersey Reyes Barrios, who are 3 people from Venezuela who were seeking asylum, who reported to, legal channels or whatever for seeking asylum. They don't have Tren de Agua ties. They don't have the wrong tattoos. They don't have criminal records in the United States or in Venezuela. And yet all 3 of those folks were summarily deported to CCOT, the El Salvadoran super prison where they're currently keeping MS-13 members. The law that they're being deported under is the Alien Enemies Act, which the only way that this works, we are not in a state of war with the state of Venezuela. The only way that it works is because they declared Tren de Agua a foreign terrorist organization. So it's a misapplication of the law. It's no due process. And it's screwed over at least 3 people that we know of who are decent human beings as far as we can tell. So that's where, for me, it's a fundamental violation of American principle, which I just kind of want to give the audience to chew on.
But at the same time, if they're illegally in the country, they are already breaking the law. So regardless of whether they're part of some foreign terrorist network, they're illegally in the country. It's right. Basically, it's very cut and dry when you think about it. Now, I agree with you on one point. If I were the president of the United States, I would extend leniency to people who had committed no other crime. I would absolutely do that. And I do disagree with the Trump administration on focusing on these things when there are cartel members and actual terrorists and so forth in the country. I agree with you on that. But at the same time, these people had to have known when they came into the United States illegally, they didn't have the paperwork, they didn't do the biometrics or any of that other stuff, the things that people pay thousands and thousands of dollars to do simply to set foot in the United States. And I've known people that are legal immigrants to the United States. Hell, Melania Trump, the first lady, she's a legal immigrant. I've known people that have gone through that process. It is time-consuming, it is costly, and it requires a lot of legalese. They took the steps to be American. I cannot, out of pocket, simply respect a person for having crossed the Rio Grande, and I have no assurance necessarily that they're not some sort of sleeper agent, that they're not a terrorist, that there's not something else that they're doing that's wrong, that they're not going to lapse into selling drugs. We've had a report last year. Up to a third of all unaccompanied minors that came into the country, they can't even account for them. Guess where they're at right now? They're in brothels and sweatshops. if they're not already dead. And so I think we need to secure the border, number one. And I think Trump is right to deport people, number two, to take pressure off of a system which is terribly overburdened. I have sympathy for many of these people, but I can't have sympathy for them at the expense of my fellow citizens.
There's a distinction here that needs to be pointed out, that these were asylees. These are people who did. I'll agree with you here. You can't show up to another country and then just be like, "Hey, I'm here. You got to deal with me." Right? For me, I actually, believe it or not, I'm a Republican in a lot of ways. I just hate Trump. So I don't think that any country has any moral duty to take care of anybody else. I do think it's good, however. These are asylees. These are people who are coming from a failed state, who are applying to the Department of State saying, hey, I'm coming from a failed state. If I go back, I face political persecution, death, murder, disappearance by cops. As a result, I want to stay in the United States. And they're working through the court case. I think the reason why these cases are particularly egregious is because I think with one of them, I forget which one, but we could find it, is that they had a pending asylum review case from a judge that was, the date was 2 weeks after they were deported. So they reported to the authorities. They said, we're trying to come here correctly. They were working with the federal government, and then the federal government screwed them over. Another thing that needs to be pointed out with these cases in particular is that they're being sent to CCOT, which is in El Salvador. They're not going back to Venezuela for processing by Venezuelan authorities. They're going effectively to El Salvador's version of Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. So I don't find this particularly reassuring. I don't think that this would stand that you did it to citizens, but it doesn't mean that it's not being done to human beings.
I realize that they're human beings, but at the same time, they broke the law. They came
No,
into
they
the country.
did. I'm gonna press you a little bit. No, they didn't. They showed up to the ports of entry and they reported themselves as asylees. So I disagree with you. These people don't deserve to be in CCOT.
One quick aside thing for everybody.
I don't believe that they need to be in a supermax or anything like that. I don't deem that.
Sure.
But that being said, if you come to the country and not all of the I's are dotted and not all the T's are crossed, you're going to get deported. That's just the way that it is.
There's something I got to respond to here real quick. I had on JJ Carell, who's a former Border Patrol guy, and he told me that throughout the Biden administration, the CBP app was being misused by a lot of people, where the cartels were even auctioning off the VPN for northern Mexico, booked people flights from all around the world to cross to that area, where they just presented it with no evidence necessary for them to be declared as a refugee from some tyrannical regime or whatever, and it was just accepted. Now, I'm not saying, Connor, that the case you're talking about with somebody who actually came to the court and all of that would fall in line with the people who are just misusing it. Obviously, that is an example of somebody who actually went through the process. But to be fair to Styx, that kind of abuse was also going on when it comes to the CBP app.
And also, can I point something out? Do we really trust the courts at this moment? Are we really going to trust the courts? Are we really going to trust the judiciary
on the street? So hold on. So all right, I'm going to expand a little bit. So I have no problems arguing the details of immigration policy, and we probably have a 70% overlap, by the way. I literally think that the Rio Grande should be physically secure. You are incapable of traveling north of the Rio Grande without somebody from the United States stopping, detaining you, verifying who you are. And if you're not somebody who has a potentially legally justifiable reason to come into the country, you literally just get kicked back. I think that is a national security priority. So we agree here. But what we're kind of arguing this within the frame of whether or not Trump is being dictatorial or being authoritarian. And I think that specifically, if you follow these logical variable steps, you kind of have to agree with my position, which is he's invoking a wartime law. He's using it incorrectly. We already know of 3 or 4 examples of the law being abused and screwing human beings over. And these human beings are not suffering they stubbed their toe. They are at threat of living for years or decades within a supermax prison, or they're liable to get killed by the governments that they're being deported to. And so these are not simple things. And as a matter of fact, I would find these completely violative of the spirit of the United States of America.
I believe in allowing people to gain refugee status in the United States. Don't get me wrong. But that being said, there's a process that you have to go through to actually attain that. You're pointing out 3 or 4 examples. How many 300,000 or 400,000 examples are there of people misusing that system? That would be my question. Because for every person that is legitimately a refugee coming to the United States, genuinely, like they were born in Venezuela, they hate communism, they want to be a capitalist, they want to be an American, more power to you. You know, you'll be more patriotic than 99% of the native-born citizenry. But for every one of those people, there's 100 others that simply want to get their foot in the door, come into the country, and mess shit up. And that's the problem.
So we don't loop, because it seems like we're going to disagree on whether or not this is an indication of Trump's authoritarianism and the pragmatic levels of immigration. I'm okay to put a pin on this, that you know my position, I know your position. And then this actually gets to something that I think is pretty interesting, which is the Mahmoud Khalil and the Ozturk cases, because I actually differentiate these two for a reason. And if you'll indulge me some framing. My understanding of the situation is that these are both pro-Palestinian voices who are student visa holders within the United States of America. I think that this is a privilege. I don't agree with like the crazy liberals and progressives that this is a human right. You have a human right to an American education. That's bullshit, right? But what I differentiate between these two people is that Ozturk allegedly penned a vaguely pro-Palestinian op-ed in which she did not endorse the terrorist group or the terrorist group Hamas at all, whereas Khalil did work for an organization known as CUAD that effectively did glorify the attacks on October 7th. So for me, what I would want is due process. I would want a judge to be able to say, this person did not support a foreign terrorist organization. This person did. Therefore, this person can continue their education. This person can be deported. But my understanding right now is that they've put that power in the hand of Marco Rubio, and he's basically said, fuck both of these people. They're both gone.
Yeah. There is a differential. People should be able to speak their conscience. And I don't have any problem with somebody saying, you know, Hail Palestine or something like that while being on a student visa. But that's completely different from the average person who's coming across the border illegally. 99% of the time, it's simply somebody wandering across the Rio Grande. Sometimes you have people who are legitimate refugees. And sometimes you have people who are seeking education. Maybe they even want to join the U.S. military. Hell, if you're fighting for the country, you should get your green card. But that is a small, minute portion of these particular cases. Most of the time, it's people entering the country illegally, wandering across the border. Sometimes they're not even processed at all. And some of these people are unaccompanied minors, as I said. Up to a third of these individuals have effectively disappeared from the system. The so-called guardians that requisitioned them, they can't even be reached by ICE. These kids are being trafficked. They're being worked to death in sweatshops, probably working 60, 70 hours a week, and things like that. This is not give us your tired, huddled masses. This is not give us your tired and poor and we will uplift them. This is, hey, let's let corporations exploit people.
Sure.
You know, off the books.
This is, you're not going to find me arguing for sweatshop labor and sex trafficking within the United States. Just a little detail about me. I'm a former law enforcement officer. So basically, like, I would side 100% with the federal government, finding these corporations that are profiting from slave labor, finding these sex trafficking organizations that are profiting from it, that are putting these girls into strip joints and undercover brothels and breaking these people up and giving them insane sentences. You're not going to find an objection from me there. What I'm asking specifically, though, is in reference to students. Okay, I think that coming here and learning is a privilege. However, I think that we have this culture of, you mentioned it, freedom of conscience, right? Freedom of conscience, freedom of speech. And I think that that should be reinforced within limit. So within limit, I think being an Arab Muslim person, I'm trying to make a specific case, being an Arab Muslim person and being sympathetic to the Palestinian cause is different from expressing support for the actions taken on October 7th and Hamas in general, right? And so what I would say is, if you support Hamas, there's a subcategory called deportable aliens. It's like a statute. And it says that if you endorse terrorist organizations, we can kick you the fuck out. I agree with that wholeheartedly. But what they're doing right now is they're basically saying any support of Palestine in which we can show that you were active in public about your support of Palestine, you're also getting deported. And that is what Marco Rubio is doing right now. So what do you think? I get it. It's out of our hands legally. What do you think is the line?
Well, I'm never been a big Rubio fan.
Sure.
I think we're debating about Donald Trump, though. It seems that he has
I would see him as an
different things in
extension.
mind. The thing is that Marco Rubio was chosen for a very good reason, a political one. I don't believe in deporting someone simply because they say, I'm pro-Palestine. I don't believe in that. But at the same time, if you are illegally in the country, it really doesn't make a difference. If you're
We are talking about
illegally,
student visa holders.
well, listen, if you're illegally in the country, then you've already got the black spot, so to speak, R in pirate talk, matey. So maybe don't rock the boat. Maybe that would be a good idea.
Sure, but I just want to specify, we are talking about student visas. So these are people who are overseas, who applied, who said, I want to come to this school and we are willing to pay tens of thousands of dollars in literally not out of state tuition, out of country tuition. So they're paying tens of thousands of dollars to get educated. And the United States government says, you don't have a criminal background. You seem like a relatively intelligent person. You have the academics to come to the school. You can come to the school for this set of time. So I understand that we're talking about this within the realm of immigration in general. However, I do think it needs to be pointed out that we are talking about student visas, people who didn't show up and then get approved. These are people who applied and then got approved.
I have a question for both of you guys. If we were talking about people who were advocating the political position of the NSDAP, or that of the Soviet Union, for instance, would the similar situation apply there? So somebody who, was a good student, maybe somebody back in the day, in the 60s, comes from Russia, was given like a medal by, Joseph Stalin or whatever, Brezhnev, and he comes and, smart guy, but all of a sudden he starts spouting all of these pro-USSR talking points and becomes a fifth columnist within the United States. At what point should we do something about that? And the reason why I pointed out, both of you guys are probably going to completely disagree with me here. But as far as just the religion of Islam goes, it's a political system. It's not just a religion, which is, in my opinion, incompatible with any kind of secular law. So it has nothing to do with Hamas, has nothing to do with any of this stuff. Just that by itself seems to be a really, really big problem if we just look at the bigger picture. But with that also, if any of you guys have any super chats you want to sneak out, just a friendly reminder. Anyway, guys, you have the floor.
If a person is legally immigrated to the United States, that is, they're in on a visa or something like that, I believe in generally leaving them alone. If they're going to eventually become a citizen of the United States, of course, it's good training in the fact that they should be left alone when they're exercising their right to free expression, their right to free speech. I think, however, that most of the focus is on people who are illegally in the country. That's 99% of the focus. I think that there are some concerning aspects to the deportation policy. And the hope is that we build a much better border wall from sea to shining sea, and then we don't have as many crossings. So then hopefully this problem will not crop up again.
Yeah, what's funny is I'm actually more authoritarian than both of you on this. So basically, like, if you're a fifth columnist, then fuck you. Okay, I hate to say it, but it's true. So from my perspective, I'm more chill on Islam, just being real, Lev, just because I have a decent amount of Muslim friends who seem to have been able to secularize and kind of take like a more modern take on their religion, and therefore be less hostile to the secular government of the United States of America. However, for me, like, citizens, in my opinion, have a full extension of the Constitution of the United States of America, First Amendment, Second Amendment, due process of law, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we do hold some of these true for resident aliens. But if you actually check the deportable aliens list, there's a whole list of behaviors that you can be deported for, and not all of them are criminal. And so what I would say is, if you're hostile and antithetical to the American government, fifth column, meaning that you are against the other columns, so to speak, then yeah, like, fuck you, go back to your country. You can go be a dissident, theocratic, fascist, Islamist, communist someplace else. I don't need you in my country. Fuck you.
Styx, do you agree?
I would disagree on one count, which is screw the government. If a person is anti-government, then I would want them in the country more, actually.
But if they were, well, hold on, if they were like an anarchist or a libertarian,
yeah,
like
absolutely.
an anti-government libertarian, you would be like, fuck yeah, come on in.
Yeah, it's like, hey, I just want to be left
Yeah, but that's
alone.
just because you want more of you around you. That's not
Yes,
like the
exactly.
principle.
Of course I do.
Government.
I hold my self-interest.
You want to be like Elon Musk, sending little packets of mail to very beautiful ladies, and then creating like little Styxes everywhere.
I just want a bunch of chickens in the backyard, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but I don't think you guys are disagreeing as much on a lot of the basics. I think the real problem is, do we excuse the eggs that are cracked while trying to make the omelet here? Because that really seems to be the dividing line, right? Like, Styx, you understand that we are going to have certain yahoos going above and beyond whatever needs to be done, and getting innocent people, like that Russian dissident I mentioned, for what should have been just like a fine for these Pepe the Frog embryos, getting her deported. So that's just something that reeks of idiocy. And this idiocy, we could either say, well, we're trying to do this big thing, countering, sex trafficking and all that. So we're going to excuse the idiots. There's always going to be idiots. It's never going to be perfect, but it's for a greater good. Would you say, Styx, that you agree with that? Because Connor seems to disagree.
I think that me and Connor actually agree mostly on this. It's about priorities. There are people in this country that are beheading people, hanging them on overpasses, forming gangs, raping people, trafficking children, things like that. Prioritize deporting them. And then, if you have time, get to everything else. Yes, I do believe that if a person is illegally in the country, they should be deported or at least processed. That being said, some of these individuals are causing far more problems than others. I don't even think that we really disagree on this, actually.
Well, and don't worry, I have like 2 or 3 other examples that we can fight over. The interesting thing is, I feel like I'm more authoritarian again, though, which is funny because we supposedly started on the opposite sides of the fence. Here's the thing. I don't know if deporting Tren de Agua members back to Venezuela, if they are alleged arms of the Venezuelan government, I don't know if that makes sense. So let's say that they're guilty of everything that we've accused them of. They're importing fentanyl, they're importing cocaine, they're importing heroin, they're drug mules. When they get here, they're violent gangs, they're taking over residential blocks, they're intimidating their neighbors, they're killing people, this, that, the other, okay? Well, if we're sending them back to Venezuela, we're sending them back to a failed state. We're sending them back to where the richer ones can probably bribe their way out of jail or prison, and then they can come back if they feel so inclined. And so for me, I'm all about deporting the people that make sense to deport. If there's somebody in the middle, they're like a lieutenant, a drug lieutenant, and you can't prove any homicides. But particularly, for the highest members, as an example, we brought in the cartel leaders from the Sinaloa into the United States. That way, we knew that they could no longer lead their organizations. And just to finish this point, all I'm saying is, deportation, I agree with the vibe that you're saying, prioritize the highest level offenders, but I also think that some of the higher level offenders, some of the leaders, we should keep here and incarcerate for lifetime.
I don't think that it should be up to the U.S. taxpayers to pay for that, though.
But the alternative is sending them back to a failed state and then they come back.
You realize the cost involved, right?
Well, if you can convict them of murder, I have no problem with summary execution.
Yeah, but we can't do that.
I mean,
10 years later, you're still on appeal and stuff like that.
Listen, I have a whole spiel for you about how we could make the death penalty more efficient and also make it safe for potentially innocent people.
What we
That's
need
just
to
not
do
the debate
is
we agreed to have today.
What we need to do is have more beefy self-defense laws in the United States so that we can just blast these people. Unfortunately, right now we don't have that.
Yeah.
So you're
But to be
talking
I live
about
in
the
Florida,
taxpayers
so
absorbing, what is
Yeah,
it,
but
50 grand a year or some crazy amount like that
yeah, but to be
sure.
fair to
for at least
Connor,
half a decade?
So I'll do it very briefly.
okay.
Oftentimes, you're right that the cost of taxpayer for a death penalty is insane. 50 grand a year for a decade or 2 decades before these people actually get executed. That's largely an administrative cost, and that's largely in incarceration cost and appeals, right? So what I would do is I would basically move the death penalty standard to beyond a shadow of a doubt standard. And what I mean by that is there's that guy who's very famous. I think his name's Peterson in San Francisco, who allegedly killed his wife and baby, and he's serving a life sentence right now. They try to do the death penalty, but there's still nobody saw him do it. Nobody saw him dispose of the body. It just makes sense that he killed his wife. There's no other suspects, right? So he's currently serving a life sentence, and he got off of death row because he appealed it a whole bunch. However, we also have Doshgar Sarnaev, who blew up the Boston Marathon and killed half a dozen people. And we know through digital forensics evidence and text messages to his brother and emails and plans that this guy 100% did it. So in my opinion, the guy who murdered his wife allegedly, he can go to jail for life. That's fine. Doshgar Sarnaev, beyond a reasonable doubt, that should be appealed once to make sure all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, and then he should be executed. They should walk him right back out and shoot him in the back of the head.
Yeah, but the sad part is that's not the way that it works.
Well, when I'm president, that's exactly how it'll work. So,
Yeah.
so you're saying that we probably have too much agreement on immigration in order to really have a contention. So I want to bring up other evidence for why I feel like Trump is going authoritarian, or basically should be viewed as authoritarian and treated hostile. So
Of course he is. He is an authoritarian. It's just that he's aiming it in the right direction, generally speaking.
well, I appreciate
like
that feels
even-
like a more sober statement than I'm used to on Twitter.
Yeah, it's like, as a classical liberal, I would say, of course, Trump is an authoritarian. You're not going to get any other form of U.S. president. But at the very least, he's trying to do what's right.
Okay. Well, let's talk about that then. And we can take this more as a discussion than as like a hostile debate or whatever, because we seem to have some overlap, but I'll try to keep it as spicy as possible.
I don't think we're going to have much of a hostility.
Okay. So let's talk about Greenland then. So Bill Barr has this very famous quote from when he was pissed off at Trump. And he said, even if you like Trump's policies, he is the last person that you want executing them, because he will create such a backlash to something that is obviously good that you will basically take 3 steps behind. So that's how I feel about Greenland. I actually think that the United States, Canada, Mexico, Central America, South America should be more unified as a geopolitical entity with better trade, relationships, security agreements, et cetera, et cetera. Even Greenland should be a part of that. But what's happening is, for no reason that I can fathom whatsoever, he and JD Vance are antagonizing Denmark and Greenland, saying that like military options are on the table. We need this for our national security, this, that, the other, when it could be negotiated by what's called a status of forces agreement, which we have with every other allied country on the planet, where we just say, these are the material resources we're interested in. This is the security. This is the amount of troops and basing and operations we want to do. Let's agree to a compromise where we get what we want and we pay the appropriate toll. We could have done that in 2 weeks and been done with this shit. But for some reason, JD Vance and Donald Trump seem obsessed with beating up our allies.
I don't think it's really about that. I think that it's the big ask. And what they want is access to mineral and fuel resources. And basically, Denmark, I mean, what are they going to do? They're in NATO. They're in the EU. They're also a tiny country with limited military capabilities. We could send a couple of destroyers over to the coast of Greenland and completely cock-block them. I don't believe in doing this, but we could, should we choose to do so. I think that what is happening is that Donald Trump wants to extract resources from Greenland, draw them out of the Eurosphere, because Greenland's not even part of the European continent anyway, and put it in the American sphere. And I think that Trump should invoke the Monroe Doctrine and say, look, this is technically part of the Americas. we're going to invest heavily in this country. We're going to make all the Greenlanders rich. We're also going to make ourselves rich. We're going to extract the oil. We're going to extract the gas. We're going to extract the minerals. And that's, I think, what his plan is.
Listen.
The idea that Donald Trump is going to invade Greenland or something, I've seen liberal commentators say that sort of thing, and I could only laugh. I can only laugh now because it's never going to happen. It's not even a threat. It's more like, hey, we've got a pile of treasure here. Let us invest it. And then you get rich, we get richer, everyone wins. You know,
my beef, my objection with what you just said is that on a phone call to Greenland, the Danish, Donald Trump called the Danes and said, the Danes were like, okay, all right, that was funny. Let's negotiate. What do you want? What do you need? And Donald Trump was like, I want Greenland. And that was it. That was his position. So you're saying like it's the big ask and it's going to be negotiated back. Where's the negotiating backwards? We've already been doing this for 60 days. Frankly, I thought Donald Trump forgot about Greenland for a month because he didn't talk about it for 30 days. In my opinion, this guy is a dog chasing cars and he just remembers that there's another car driving down the roadway randomly. So this is my position, is like, why are we, especially when NATO is in a precarious position, why are we antagonizing a NATO ally? Why are we trying to screw them over and box them out of their own like legally provincial holdings when we could come to a win-win-win scenario?
Their colonial monarchist holdings. The thing is that Denmark is a tiny country with a tiny population, incapable fundamentally of defending Greenland. We're capable of defending it.
Styx, I
got
to get into
You're appealing to pragmatism, and if you'll indulge me, one more quote. There's the Athenians. They invaded this neutral country during the Spartan War, and they were like, "Why are you invading and slaughtering and enslaving us?" And the Athenians say, "The powerful do what they can; the weak suffer what they must." And so that's kind of the quote that I'm pulling out of what you're saying. I don't even think that you necessarily agree with it morally. You're just saying these are the facts on the ground.
Yeah. No, nobody's actually suggesting invading Greenland or attacking.
I got to step in here really quick, because what's being discussed right now from the Russian perspective goes as follows. There is a justification right now that's being seen within Russian media when it comes to Putin, where, well, if the United States can go after Greenland, then why can't we go into Ukraine? And it creates this domino effect over time.
Itself without Europe.
Well, then we'll have a trilateral world. The United States gobbles up Greenland, and Russia gobbles up Ukraine, and China gobbles up Taiwan.
I feel like we're playing like a game of Command and Conquer right now. Like I get it. I love real-time strategy games, but this doesn't feel like good foreign policy when we're talking about the actual lives of human beings.
Well, that and also,
but you also have to be pragmatic. The fact is that the people of Greenland overwhelmingly appear to support parsing themselves from Denmark. Well, they're going to be in somebody's sphere. It's just a matter of whether they're in the Eurosphere or the Amerisphere. The thing is that the Amerisphere offers them more protection.
Okay. I feel like this is partial meme, so I'm going to cut through the flack. Like, listen, I don't disagree with the concept of the powerful do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. That's just like a geopolitical reality. So we don't disagree there. But what I disagree with is the fact that we are publicly embarrassing and ridiculing a ally in order to obtain minerals, oil, gas, and security in the Arctic, when we could just negotiate that. We could just say, hey, let ExxonMobil and all the American oil companies come up to Greenland and develop whatever natural gas and oil reserves you have. Let's get all the rare minerals out of there. And this is the military commitment that we want for the next century, where we're allowed to station this many troops in Greenland and we're allowed to conduct this many operations with this many refueling stations. Even if Greenlanders want some level of autonomy or whatever, they can vote on a referendum to separate themselves from Denmark, but that should be separate from us. We should have leaders from Greenland and leaders from Denmark in the room making this decision as a joint venture. I have no idea why we're treating our allies as enemies, which is another thing that goes into the next things I want to talk about.
Well, we're not treating them as enemies. The thing is,
we're treating them
Denmark,
as rivals.
Technically speaking, Denmark is a monarchical power that has colonized this particular piece of land. And the United States stands for anti-monarchism, generally speaking.
And we're so boys with really Saudi Arabia. What's this point?
No, I'm saying, well, the people of Saudi Arabia haven't risen up and started protesting in favor of having a Republican democracy or something like that. But the people of Greenland overwhelmingly support the idea of leaving Denmark.
But they can't protest. It's so fucking cold. Nation. I don't even know if I can verify what you're saying. Because there's only 50,000 people and they're all freezing their asses off. I can't tell if you're being sincere, because I don't know if Greenlanders know if that's true.
The people of Greenland have overwhelmingly expressed a desire to
I'll Google it.
Break away from Denmark.
Does Greenland...
Now, that doesn't mean that they want to become the 51st state, but they are going to need protection. Because of the enormous number of strategic resources there, they'd get invaded right quick if somebody's not protecting them.
In February 2024, the nation-state of Greenland officially declared its desire for independence.
Yeah, but there's no way that Greenland can possibly guard itself independently.
Sure.
Because they don't have enough of a population, don't have enough of a military presence, and they have too many resources. Sure. So somebody's going to have to defend them. So they can lean towards Europe, or they can lean towards the United States.
Okay, I agree with leaning towards the United States. I just don't think we have to like piss on Denmark's boots, while we're doing it. But it's okay.
Although it's fun.
I don't know if you're being tongue-in-cheek or sincere, and frankly, I don't think it matters. I would use your line of argumentation if there was an authoritarian nation within Eastern Europe or within Africa or within the Middle East or North Africa. I would use your rationale to support their attempt at independence. So I don't care enough to like fight you on it, even if I think that this is Trump retardation. So sorry, moving to the next point, I guess, just because I again don't think that we're going to line up. So I think that the thing about this is we're talking about what's going on with these things, and I think that there's a certain amount of like, well, when you're trying to make an omelet, you got to crack a few eggs. I think this is going to cost the Republicans in the midterms, 100%. I think backstabbing Ukraine. I think the Greenland drama. I think I don't think anybody will be talking about the Signal chats 2 years ago, but the general or 2 years from now. But I think the general perception of like executive incompetence in bipolar disorder is going to cost MAGA in the midterms. And just as another example of this, JD Vance is talking about like, oh, well, effectively the international order views Europe as an American protectorate. However, that costs us $2 trillion a year. Therefore, it's incumbent upon Europeans to secure themselves. By the way, something I agree with. However, this is pointing to some level of fiscal conservatism that frankly isn't going to happen. They're not talking about cutting costs from the Department of Defense. They're talking about cutting costs from entitlements. So this feels like a hollow gesture from a bipolar executive.
I don't disagree with you on that one.
Okay.
There we go. But it does tie into authoritarianism as well, because if we see this level of incompetence among people like Pete Hegseth and company, that's not a good sign, because it's as far away from the founding fathers' ideal as you can get. If these are people who rely on, I don't know, brown-nosing, towards Trump, then I don't think it's a stretch to say that they may be willing to do things in the future that are going to be far more authoritarian-minded than whatever we're even seeing right now. Because to me, I don't know, I just see a combination between this incompetence and an acceptance of skirting the law to such an extent that later on you may as well have Queen AOC come into power,
Yeah.
and then it flips the other way around.
Actually, I want to ask Styx a perception question. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's this article that got released like 2 years ago that was saying domestic house cats would eat their owners if they had the ability to, like physically, but they don't have the ability to, and therefore they don't, right? And so I kind of view Trump similar to Lev, where this is a warm up, and he would be doing more authoritarian shit, but the Republic is strong enough to check him on his agenda. So do you think that Trump is effectively a house cat that is being checked by older institutions?
Like
he would be more authoritarian if he could.
It depends on what realm he'd be authoritarian in, is my answer to that.
If he could be president for a third or fourth term, would he be?
No, I think that he's done with it. I don't think that he would bother seeking a third term, even if he could.
All right, I'm going to be a little bit of a dick. So Bannon said that 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he's looking for ways to read the Constitution so he can run for a third term. People are joking about J.D. Vance running and then Trump being VP and then just deferring all his duties to Trump. And then also Trump basically said, oh, yeah, we're going to explore that, but right now we got to focus on our current term. So I'm going to be a little bit of a dick and say, like, listen, this dude, if he could, he would.
I don't know, Styx. You remember like Jon Stewart loved to do all these little jokey jokes all the time, and that was his shield, where he could just say, oh, I was just joking about, my views about Republicans. I don't want it to be really the same thing here, because then it does become something that people can use as a shield to, kind of like test the waters, see if this is something that, maybe people could start warming up to. And I'm not even saying that may be the intent.
The amendment is
originally
fairly explicit in that a person can only serve 2 terms as president. A lot of people like to drag it out and say, well, it says consecutive terms. Yes, look at Section 1A. You can only serve up to 2 full terms as president of the United States.
Listen, I'm going to admit I'm a little bit disappointed. You're wearing a pirate hat. You have the aesthetics of like a 1980s hair metal, rock guy. I was half expecting like a heroin needle to be popping out of your arm, and yet we just keep getting like relatively sane takes. Like still, like we're on different parts of the spectrum. But it's not like, oh yeah, Trump is God Emperor. He should rule forever. Fuck everybody else.
I hate it
like,
when
that's what I was
people
looking
do
for.
that.
I'm not gonna lie. That's what I was looking for. So.
I hate it when people do that, because it's like, okay, this is a Reaganite reformist.
Yeah.
And I've told people for years and years, he's not going to solve every single problem overnight, and he's certainly not going to be perfect.
Okay.
But people expect him to be. Some people, they jump down his throat because they expect him to be perfect, according to exactly what they want.
Have we had examples of the law being bent in a way that's completely inexcusable, where we could say, well, now this law has been so much, future leaders like an AOC can justify doing much more extreme things now?
Weirdly enough, I don't blame Trump for that. Okay. So I actually blame the war on terror for that. And we had people who were arguing this for like 2 or 3 decades, and I'm old enough to remember these arguments. The argument was that in Bill Clinton 1990s, we relatively had a balance between the branches that seemed respectable. After 9/11, Congress seemed to be perfectly happy ceding a majority of their responsibilities to the executive branch and then rubber stamping everything that the executive branch did, no matter how much it cost in blood or treasure, right? And so we've had this buildup for 2 decades to the point that Obama, God bless his soul, I'm looking back at him a little bit more favorably now compared to Trump, but, he killed an American citizen overseas, effectively just consulting lawyers before he did it. They didn't review it by the Supreme Court. They didn't review it by the Congress. Nobody really took him to task for it. He just drone striked an American citizen. I agree with the general vibe that if you're an anti-American terrorist overseas and there's no good way to bring you in, then maybe you should be killed. But the fact that we didn't even bother to review that by a court, I just feel shows the concentration of power in the executive. So I don't blame Trump for doing it, because we've been talking about it for 2 decades.
Yeah, but is the door open too much now so that
Yes.
you could have people like Rubio, for instance? I don't remember his exact quote, but he was brown-nosing so much in a recent speech talking about how we must do this, for Trump's sake. And it's like, why is Trump becoming something that, I think Styx would very much disagree with wanting him to become? But it's not even Trump. It's a lot of these people that are around Trump that are reinforcing this God Emperor thing, and that's not good.
They believe in the power of the unitary executive.
Sometimes Trump is not the problem, it's the people that he surrounds himself with. This is a big problem in his first term. In his second term, it's relatively less of a problem, but he's still got the Rubios and people like that, so it can still be a little bit of a problem.
This is where the libertarian and the neocon are going to split, though, okay? So I don't believe that it's Trump's fault that so much power is concentrated in the executive and we no longer do legislation. We do executive orders. That's all we do anymore as a country. But I think that this is a real problem. So anything created by an executive order can be undone by an executive order. AID was largely dismantled through executive order. The DOE being dismantled right now is largely being done by executive order. The FBI faces a similar weakness because it was established by executive order. But these things I view as bad. So USAID, in my opinion, the dissolution of this is evaporating our international soft power. The concentration of power within the executive branch to negotiate treaties and all that kind of stuff, that backstabbed Ukrainians and cost them hundreds, if not thousands of lives in one of the most incompetent and stupid fucking ways I could have possibly imagined within the past month or two. DOE getting dissolved. I'm not black. I'm not a woman. I'm not gay. So I don't really care that much. But the blacks, the women's, and the gays are going to have less of an access to sports and education and all this bullshit through the DOE.
How the hell is the Department of Education going to uplift anyone? When
What's
the
that?
Department of Education was first incepted by Jimmy Carter, we went from 1st to 24th in educational attainment. So I would disagree with you on that one.
Wait, sorry, say that again. We went from 1st to 24th.
You're referring to the Department of Education, the DOE, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, when it was incepted by Jimmy Carter, we were number 1 in the world, basically. Now we're number 24 in educational attainment. So I'd say scrap it. Get rid of it. I agree with Trump on that one.
But this is the point where, again, neocon versus libertarian, this is where we're going to disagree, okay? If there's a child in East Africa that can survive off of 12 cents a day in order to keep their HIV medication floating or whatever, I would say that's an easy cost to pay. It probably
I would also say it's not my problem.
Well, right. So this is where we're going to defer. I'm going to say that it's easy and it's cheap to get soft power with international communities with whom we might want to trade or have security agreements in the first place. So why not? And
Why
then
do we
same
need
thing with the
Department
DOE.
of Education or or USAID or some similar.
Well, I was going to go to DOE. But
I got to step in here. So when we're talking about the neocon position, I would say the true neocon position, which has never really been tried in the century, would be neither what you guys are talking about. It would be going into Africa, recolonizing it, and then making sure that we're not babysitting people who don't know how to take care of themselves otherwise, where we're just keeping a
Lev,
population
I gotta
going
push back
through
on
aid.
that as well.
Okay.
We had the largest and most costly neocon experiment in the war on terror. And so we tried to recolonize Middle East and North Africa and give it our culture and our values and our government, and it didn't work.
Yeah, because we teamed up with all these dumb tribes. Like, we didn't have Alexander the Great tier figures who would have been running shit there. You know what I mean? We just teamed up with some Abdullah.
I don't think the neocons of the 70s through the 90s, even if they believed that that was their rhetoric, I don't think they would have had the stones to slaughter tens of thousands of Iraqis wholesale to get them in line with the American government.
It would have been a multi-generational. Yeah.
I completely opposed the Iraq War myself. That being said, I don't know what it has to do with your previous point.
Oh, okay. So let me bring it back. So neocons are more for government intervention internationally, of course. But I do spread that to the domestic front as well, where I think that we have an economic responsibility to our own people to make sure that they have access to lives. The reason why I would say that we were let's say we were number first in education in the 60s and 70s, right?
We were.
The reason why I would believe that to be the case is because it was so deregulated that the people who could climb would climb, right? And so as a result, we had all of these super high achievers, et cetera, et cetera. What DOE try to do, which I think is a moral imperative on a society, is effectively No Child Left Behind, where you have a basic level of educational attainment that's available to everyone. So you don't have your God, why can't I can see Matt Damon's face?
But
What was
that's
that dumb movie
only
from the
the thing
90s?
is that that's only on paper. That's not the way that it actually works. That's basically an early like proto version of DEI when you think about it.
Sure.
On paper, it's hey, everyone at the very least has this basic stepping stone, and then we let people go from there. But in reality, it's more like, hey, we're putting this stone on top of your heads, and so the high achievers, they get screwed. Like, for instance, it was only a couple of months ago, I think I reported on it, in, I believe it was Washington State, might have been Oregon. They were eliminating AP courses. So,
Yeah, that's
in other words,
insane.
it's an anti-meritocracy. Some student will go in there, they're a genius in a low-performing school, but they're not allowed to take AP courses. So, students of greater means, greater wealth, yes, they're able to take 5 or 6 AP courses. They can get a whole semester knocked out of the way before they even go to college. But that student, his parents are poor. And so he can't take the AP courses. He can't get those college credits. He might be smarter than all of the other kids that'll go to that school, but he's still going to have to pay more moolah.
There's an issue in the Pacific Northwest and West Coast that I'm not surprised by. I was just talking to a person from San Francisco who was actually responsible for eliminating the school board because they were trying to do something similar. They were effectively trying to eliminate hard math because it was racist to Black and Hispanic students, which is criminally fucking insane. So just because you hear me advocating for the state to involve itself in the affairs of others doesn't mean that I'm advocating for it to do so in the dumbest way fucking possible.
I advocate the state staying out of my affairs as much as possible because
Styx,
all it does is screw things up.
But here's the thing, though. This is what I'm gonna have to argue it because I'm gonna start streaming full time tomorrow. This is something that I should be telling folks. I'm actually starting full time on YouTube, streaming and doing YouTube and political commentary full time starting tomorrow.
Nice.
So if you want to check me out, check out Counterpoints 40K. That's my Warhammer channel, but also check out Counterpoints, which will be my political channel.
Everybody subscribe.
So here's the thing. I think that you, Lev, and I will be fine. Okay? We're relatively intelligent. We're relatively articulate. We know how to operate a webcam. We can turn on OBS. We can figure this shit out, right? And so we'll be fine. But there are plenty of people who are dumb as shit, and they need the state to reinforce their living to some degree so they get a basic education, so they are socialized, so they have decent access to jobs that have a relatively okay standard of living. They have retirement and they have the capacity to enjoy their families. And if we don't do this, what I'm afraid of is we're going to go back to like an early 20th century haves and have-nots Darwinian system, where eventually what you're going to have is an overcorrection by socialists and fascists who are going to take over the state because the masses are so deprived.
So, in other words, we encourage educational socialism to prevent socialism. See, I would disagree with you there. I think that what we should do is, I think what we should have is an absolute meritocracy. Yes, everyone should get a basic education, but I think that we should have higher education based mainly on merit. Like, I don't want the person working in the nuclear reactor to have 65 IQ. That sounds like a bad idea, including the goddamn janitor. God, even that should come with a triple-digit requirement or something like that. If people are working in the nuclear reactor or something like that, I want them to be intelligent.
If we're talking about janitors.
Listen, you're not
It's
a
little bit different. If somebody is just picking turnips or something like that, then their educational attainment matters relatively less. But if somebody is doing something that is critical to society, I would like them to be the most intelligent possible person for that role. Oh, you're in aeronautics, or you're going to become an astronaut or something like that.
You're not going to find me defending left-wing progressive aspects on identity being necessary to break down in the highest levels. When I get onto an airplane, I used to hate flying. I still kind of do. I don't give a flying fuck if they're black, white, Hispanic, whatever. Are they trained to the maximum degree possible to pilot that aircraft and get it back to ground safely? That's all I give a shit about, right? And that's
Quick
what
thing about quick thing about
but
airline
I wanna
pilots,
point,
though.
sorry,
Sure.
if I may, real quick.
Yes.
If you talk to socialists, I made a mistake of being the right-wing heel, even though I'm pretty moderate, on Twitch and YouTube politics for 3 or 4 years. And so as a result, I've talked almost exclusively to leftists for a really long time. If you talk to leftists about FDR, he is not the person who implemented socialism. He's the person who backstabbed socialists in order to create a welfare state that allowed capitalism to perpetuate, because fascists and communists in the early 20th century were winning the minds of the masses. But when you give people enough food, water, shelter, entertainment, and education to feel like they have an okay life, they don't feel like rebelling, right? And so for me, even if this is a new consideration for you, I want you to put that in the back of your brain and chew on it, that it's basically Roman bread and circus philosophy. The masses don't rebel when they have decent lives.
Yeah, Styx, anything? I mean, before Styx responds, just a quick note about the airline pilots. As I found out from somebody who works in that industry, most of them are wealthy. You have to have a certain amount of money in order to even have time to attend most of those classes and, know what to do when it comes to this stuff. That's just like a bit of an aside. But yeah, like I'm curious, Styx, what you think of Connor's point there. His counterpoint, if you will.
I agree with him mostly, actually.
Wait, hold up. But you got to expand, man, because you're saying libertarian. I want to minimize the state. I want more libertarians. I want you to leave me the fuck alone.
Yes, I want to be left alone. The only disagreement that I would have is I don't believe that the government needs to provide a basis for people within the population. I believe that if people are generally left alone, they're capable of rising up according to their own merits, generally speaking. Like, I'll use myself as an anecdote, as I sometimes do. I was born into the lower class. My father was a chef. My mother was a stay-at-home mother. We didn't have a lot of money. I managed to build what I've got now, and I did that on my own merits. I educated myself. I didn't just do this in school. I also did this on my own time. I went to the library all the time, read a bunch of books, thousands of them. I've edited hundreds of books, and I did this because it was interesting to me. And it happened to be something that became lucrative in nature, making me a great deal of money. I think that a very small proportion of the population will be quite successful. Much of the population can at least be reasonably successful, and they can make a living. And that's what I hope for everyone that's watching out there. My hope is that everyone is on the up and up when it comes to their bills. That's what we should all be hoping for our fellow man and woman. But I don't believe that the government is responsible for that, and I don't believe it needs to be involved. If anything, if the government were completely uninvolved, people would make it a lot more.
Okay, the areas where I disagree with you is we have some historical evaluations of what this life is like, and I would say it's like the late 19th century in the United States of America. And if you look at it, it's tenement housing. It's people being squished into the minimal amount of space possible for them to live. It's them working so many hours that they don't have time to enjoy or take care of their families. And it's their children being raised in relative squalor, where there are plenty of creative ways in which people figure out how to survive and how to thrive in these environments, but it's the exception and not the rule. And so that's where I don't think that that's necessary. I think that when you ask the question, are people made to serve the economy, or is the economy made to serve the people? The answer is yes. And we can strike a balance between these two things. And I think that intelligent people wielding power can make the world better for their fellow men through effective governance. So no, we could get into it more, but I kind of reject I have way more skepticism about the nature of man than you do.
I think that your summation of the early 20th century is rather stereotypical. There were plenty of people back then. They grew their own crops, raised their own animals, raised their families and so forth, did skilled labor and so forth. My grandfather was one of them, for example. He did carpentry, he did forestry and so forth. He had a huge garden, and God, they must have grown 60, 70% of their own food themselves at the time. They were not burdened by huge amounts of government at the time.
But what happened to those people in the early 20th century?
I'll
answer my own question, but I was asking what happened to those people in the early 20th century. What happened is industrialization outcompeted them. All of their resources were outcompeted. No. They got bought out. And then as a result of getting bought out, they moved to the cities for work, and they had to work in industrialized jobs.
No, quite the opposite.
100%.
Quite the opposite in my family's case. The textile mills and things like that were concentrated in the river valley. If you were up in the hills, it was still Bumpkinville.
So
and
you had a smart bumpkin grandfather
and raised their animals.
Well, hold on. So here's the thing. This is a statistic. By the way, I'm happy that your grandfather was an industrious, skilled, talented man capable of homesteading. That is actually beautiful. Like I think most people dream of homesteading eventually, right? However, what I would say is in the United States of America in the early 20th century, at the turn of the century, 90% of people worked in agriculture and 10% of people worked in industry. By like the 1920s, the entire population employment shift had happened where it was now inverted. 90% of people worked in industry or service, and 10% of people worked in agriculture. So the story in the United States of America is agricultural workers getting shafted and shifted to the cities.
Lev's got to look up that ratio because I guarantee it's not 90-10 in favor of urban industry.
But I have a question for you guys in the meantime, though. When it comes to not what we want to happen, because Styx, obviously, you don't want any real refugees to be sent back. You don't want the yahoos in the government to abuse their power. But we can say that inevitably it will happen. Same thing when it comes to government education. Connor, you would want there to be a certain standard. The question is,
minimum.
Is it inevitable that is not the case? Just as the quick example, the kids of the architect who I know here where I am, he's going to school, and all of the Latinx kids don't know how to speak English, and they figured out like a way of talking to each other that you could say transcends language. But either way, though, that is not a great sign, nor is it a great sign in California, where so many of these kids, from the stats that I saw, are not able to read and write. So when it comes to more money being pumped to the government, especially in California, where, from what I understand, a lot of money has been pumped into that educational system, it does not result in what we want it to. So is it just inevitable that, as life is, we're going to get the worst of the worst to try to make something of the kids who they're in charge of, and it's just not going to work most of the time?
No, I'm. What's funny is I think that Styx's perspective requires like a certain amount of faith in humanity, whereas I have like more faith in institutions, I guess. We've been through so many more challenges. You could look at World War II as an example, where it seems like we accomplished an almost impossible task. You can look at the 50s and 60s and our social development there, almost impossible task that we were given, and we fulfilled it. No, I think what you would need to do is do a top-down evaluation of how people learn, and then re-energize the institutions with that. What I mean by that is you would need class sizes under 20. You would need everybody to speak English 100% of the school day, because that's how I became fluent in French. They would need to start that at a very young age. So they would need to do that under the age of 8. They're spending 8 hours a day in English. You would have to reinforce culturally reading from home. You would be surprised what people who increase their literacy are capable of once they actually have a decent base for literacy. No, and I've seen it done before. If you'll indulge me 20 more seconds. My mother used to teach in the rough part of town, and it was all the kids that you would expect to fail. It was all the black kids, bad neighborhoods, broken families. They should all be murdering each other gang style by the time they're 16. What she did, though, is she effectively opened up her hours after work and on weekends in order to help people like read. And what happened was people who were reading at a second grade level, despite being on the verge of graduating high school, they got up to the high school level within a year. And then they continued that with their own kids. And as a result of this increase in literacy, they now are healthy, happy, married, good kids who are learning to read themselves. So it can be undone.
Yeah, but isn't that the exception to the rule? Your mother, I mean, you are a very exceptional person yourself, Connor, and I'm sure that your mother and a lot of the people in your family are as well. I'm not sure we could apply these exceptions to...
We need phenomenal human beings to step the fuck up instead of saying, I'm going to go be a YouTuber and make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year creating content. Now, I'm a hypocrite because that's what I want to do. But I'm just saying we need to encourage other exceptional people to go into society and make a difference.
Before Styx responds, one counterpoint, if you will, to that is that I think a lot of the reason why people were the way they were had to do with the unforgiving environment where you either adapt or you die. And with the architect who I was speaking with, you know, the guy who worked for the FBI as an informant for the Hells Angels, like he's this, you know, really like rough guy with this handlebar mustache, like the wrestler. Anyway, he's talking about how he was in AA, you know, because he was an alcoholic, and he met a lot of people. He became a preacher. He met a lot of people who were abusing drugs. And what his perspective is that a lot of the people, especially like a lot of the white people who he met, the reason why they're not going out there and getting a lot of these, you know, jobs in construction, all of that, is because they know that at the end of the day, they can just do drugs and they're probably not going to die unless they're really, you know, not so careful with how they consume the drugs. The government's still going to take care of them. So his point, as horrible and cruel as it is to say, is that the only real way out is either you have a fire under your ass where you know you're going to literally starve to death unless you take certain steps, and probably there's going to be a lot of people who will starve to death, but that's the only way to kind of reset this whole thing and bring back these beautiful hats that Styx happens to like wearing and the founding fathers' ideals and all this good stuff, because a lot of this stuff, it can't just depend on a bunch of eggheads thinking theory. It also has to depend on knowing that if we don't do things in a certain correct way, we're going to die.
Hey, Lev, I have to go pee really quick.
All right, go pee, and while you're going pee, I just want to tell everybody, if you want to support this show, you must absolutely 100% go to Anton's USA or BiltongUSA.com. Biltong is one of the greatest things that I have ever eaten. I don't know, Connor, if you are a fan of the Biltong or not, but I highly recommend it. So we got from King of Biltong for $30. Increase your protein intake with some healthy meat snacks. Biltong is packed with B12, creatine, iron, zinc, and so much more. Get yours at BiltongUSA.com. Use code word BTR for 10% off. Guys, I had some of the Biltong yesterday. I ate the whole package, even the spicy package, which is probably not good for your stomach, but it is incredibly enjoyable. And guys, if you really want to support the show, patreon.com/breaktherules. Become a patron today. And listen, what you're going to get for becoming a patron is you are going to get MP3s of the episodes after they come out. You are going to get exclusive episodes as well, including the Jason Reza Georgiani live stream, which we're going to be having on Thursday, this coming Thursday, April 3rd. I highly recommend you guys check it out. Jason is a brilliant thinker. I would love to have more conversations with Jason, maybe even with Styx and yourself, Connor, if you're ever interested in speaking to Jason.
I'm down, man. My weekends are open. My, not all the time, but absolutely, I'm down.
And what we're going to do is after we do this live stream, we are going to have it be, I'm going to edit it, and then I'm going to bring forth as a professionally done episode on YouTube, but that's not going to include the Q&A. So if you guys want to be in the Q&A, you have to go into the Patreon. And lastly, if you become $20+ patrons of BTR, if you're around the New York City area, we have events. Connor, I would definitely love to have you over there as soon as you're able to get to New York City. We have a beautiful rooftop over there. You guys can be in the crowd there, in the audience watching it, and later we'll go up to the rooftop, have a fun time, and we're going to go to an after party as well. So guys, this is going to be you becoming a part of the BTR inner circle, where we have all the most intellectual people on here, you know, Styx, Curtis, Yarvin, Counterpoints, Connor over here. Guys, I'm telling you right now, you have to take advantage. Gnostic Informant, Uber Boyo. You guys have to take advantage of this right now, because prices are going to get up, because I have this giant compound out east. And if you want to be a part of that, that's going to be like a super duper exclusive on a need to know basis type of deal going on there. So Styx, I was just telling the people that if they want to become great supporters of the show, $20 gets them an opportunity to be audience members in the New York City studio. And Styx, I really, really hope that you're finally going to get your ass to New York City eventually.
Absolutely.
There we go.
Yeah,
So,
literally.
yeah.
I'm telling you. So sorry, real quick. I got a 6-month shot at doing this full time. Somebody is backing me. They're putting their energy behind me. I'm already making a little bit of money off of the Warhammer 40K thing. So I'm hoping in 6 months I'm going to be like, yeah, Lev, that's nothing. I made that in 2 days. I'll see you tomorrow. You know, that's what I'm hoping for.
There we go.
So if you'll indulge me a second, just because I think that you're going to have a response. There are so many dysgenic, dysfunctional, perverse incentive institutions that destroy humanity when they're supposed to empower it, that I think institutions are institutions. They're always going to be flawed. However, I think government can be a force for good, but you will be able to bring up dozens of examples of dysgenic, perverse incentive institutions that make humanity worse.
I think that government institutions, generally speaking, are a force for evil, and therefore should be limited as much as possible. They can do good. It's not impossible for them to do so. It's fairly rare, as we've seen. Look at government regulations, for example. Food regulations, we'll take as an example. They're meant to prevent people from being poisoned or, eating, some trash that's going to gunk them up. But then the same agencies that are responsible for regulating food will allow corn syrup, soy lecithin, all sorts of crazy additives, red dye 5, for example, the FDA is going after that now, into the food supply. And so it gives people cancer, and it makes people fat, and it makes people lazy and unhealthy in general. Why are we paying these people?
I'm smirking like an asshole because this is a unique historical take that I have. Being fat and dying of cancer in your 70s is a human win. Okay, so you're like, oh, red 40, it gives you cancer in your 70s.
Okay, if you're in your 40s?
Fat?
What if
you
you're
have
in your 30s?
What's that?
What if you're in your 30s or your 40s?
Then skill issue, that sucks to suck, right? So the point is though that like I'm trying to be serious here. Obesity is humanity winning at life. Now we should dial it in, obviously, but dying from being fat is your ancestors would chop off a piece of their body for that fate.
But is that what life's about?
No,
if we're talking about more in the philosophical
sense. And why should
sense.
government agencies be pushing that sort of nonsense?
We should just call it a win when we can. So hold on. So we're getting into the agencies thing. So let's say that we eliminate like the FDA, right?
We should.
Do we expect food suppliers to put less addictive chemicals and less poisons in the food?
That would be the preference, yes.
I don't think so at all. I think you would have MSG left, right, and center. I think they would come up with tasty poisons that you have not even thought. They would combine aspartame with red 40 with heroin, and then they would put it in your chicken, your chicken noodles, and you would eat that shit every day until you died. 100%.
I just believe in good labeling laws. Tell people what's in the food. Let them make their own decisions.
See,
Social
I wanna
Darwinism.
argue with like the meme position of your position, but you're right that if you just had good labeling laws, people would know what they're consuming, and then they could avoid the heroin, red 40, aspartame additives. So,
But as far as going back to a question of leadership over here, Connor, if you're in
sure.
agreement that we don't want to see a lot of these losers taking charge of our kids' education, that we do want to focus on getting as great of a quality as we probably can, I'm still leaning on the fact that short of certain, really, really hardworking exceptions like like your mother, for instance, I'm not really seeing that occur unless there is this do or die thing going on in the US, kind of
But
like with the Soviet Union. Just a quick aside, when my family saw the kind of homework that I got going to a third grade, and this was a private school, mind you, like this was already like a step up, it was pathetic. They were embarrassed. They were like, this is the kind of stuff that we were doing in like the Soviet equivalent of kindergarten. So, and that's like a commie state over here. So,
I'm with you.
I'm giving credit where credit's due.
Yeah. So no, I agree with you that the bar is on the floor and our education system is barely able to step over that bar, like trips on the bar. I agree with you there. I mean, I went through the French education system when I was a child, and basically the lycée system. I didn't learn any new math until senior year of high school because I had already learned algebra in elementary school. Right.
There we go.
So yeah, so American public school, no offense to Americans, is a fucking joke. That being said, I would want to see it paced. Okay. So I would basically want to have, like, no offense to anyone, the retard class, which is we're just trying to make sure that you have a pulse. You know how to show up to a designated location at a certain time, do something for 8 hours, and then leave. That's for the dumb fucks. Then I would want to have the average class where it's like basically probably what we have right now, to be honest. And then I would want the stratospheric class. I would want effectively, there's something called the International Baccalaureate. It's a high school degree that's internationally recognized. And if you pass that test, you can go to any school on the planet. You can go to any college on the planet with it. I would effectively want to have a IB level education from elementary school all the way to high school. And so we're talking about one of the problems that I think we all agree on is that we are putting people in the middle bucket or the retard bucket when they should be in the IB program bucket. But I think that if you stagger it and you put your populations in the appropriate buckets, you eliminate that problem.
Styx?
What we need is an unfettered meritocracy. Some people are simply not going to be high achievers. This doesn't make them bad people. It doesn't make them worth less than others. It just means that they're probably not going to be working in nuclear science or something like that. Some people are going to be in the interim. They're reasonably intelligent and they're qualified for other forms of work. But again, they're not going to be working in a nuclear reactor unless they're doing paperwork or something like that in a cubicle.
I want to ask you a question.
And some people, well, just a sec.
Sure.
And then some people are really, really high functioning. And if you give them a job less than something that the average person would find impossible, they're going to become bored. Like you have someone with a 150 IQ who has a doctorate in nuclear physics. You don't want them flipping burgers. They'll be lost completely on that particular cause. And this is not to say that anyone that's flipping burgers is a bad person or that they're worthless or anything like that. It's just to say that there are different forms of skill that people happen to have.
But I think that there is a value. I'll say it as a statement instead of a question. I think there is a value where parents need to work. They need to work 8 hours a day in a functioning capitalist society. Their children need to go somewhere during those 8 hours. At minimum, school teaches you to show up to a place, shut the fuck up, learn something for 8 hours, even if you're a dumb dipshit, and then leave. So you're providing economic liberation to the parents while also teaching kids to be employable. To me, that's the bar that we should be able to step over as a society. And I think that fulfills a social utility that should be reinforced by the state.
I don't think that it requires the state to reinforce it. I think that the average person will take that up anyway.
Yeah. What if
You
those kids
hold
are
up. You
employed?
think that kid? I'm going to be a dick. You think that kids would go to school voluntarily 8 hours a day?
Oh, no, but I think that their parents will voluntarily push them into school.
Hmm.
I disagree with truancy already as bad as it is on the West Coast, but you know what? Say
okay, but now, dare we mention the demographics of that truancy?
They're blacks and Hispanics.
Okay.
Well, right, but for me, like culture, who is it? It was like Steve Bannon. He said like politics is downstream from culture. Well, I would also make the argument that politics is a self-fulfillment mechanism of culture. And so if the culture is permissive of truant children who become drug-addicted tribal degenerates, then that system is going to perpetuate. Whereas if you have a government who says, no, fuck you, you're going to school, you're going to learn, or else a cop is going to show up to your house and fuck with your parents, I think that sets a precedent for culture.
Yeah, but then we have these female teachers.
The sort of child that's going to be habitually truant, though, probably doesn't care very much about their parents now, do they?
Well, I don't care for their lack of care. You know what? Here's another brief story. I was a 17-year-old pothead who chased girls, who was wasting my life. You know what it took in order for me to get my shit together?
Chasing girls, holy shit!
A drill instructor, 6'4", 200 pounds, getting in my face and saying, "Listen up, shut the fuck up, learn, or I'm going to beat your ass." That's what I needed at 17.
This is the point that I was bringing up to Dylan Burns on his show, which his audience completely disagreed with me on. They fucking hated me for bringing this up, where there are certain parts of the United States that are very ghettoized, where there are a lot of bad influences for a lot of young people. Why not have those places get a little bit more militarized in terms of the influence? Have certain veterans that come in there, become father figures for kids who do not have a father figure in their life, and have something to live for.
Masculine mentorship would be huge. If you went out of your way, we talk about DEI sometimes. If we had a DEI program of veterans to go into the hard schools where the kids are fist fighting and beating the shit out of each other and telling their teachers to fuck off and doing drugs in the bathrooms and all that bullshit. And then you had a bunch of veterans who had license to put their fucking hands on the teenagers if they acted up. I'm not saying beat the fuck out of them. I'm just saying, grab them by the wrist and the elbow and escort them firmly but tactfully to the principal's office. You would see a total culture shift in those schools, 100%.
You would see a bunch of lawsuits.
I wouldn't, but here's the thing. I would do limited liability. I would literally put body cams on these people, and I would do limited liability. If we escort you with a approved holding your wrist and your elbow, and then you try to spin out of it like a crocodile and you dislocate your shoulder, that's your fucking problem. That's what I would do.
See, Connor's already thinking ahead. I think you've been thinking this through for a little bit.
I was a resource officer. I know how to escort students to the front office.
Wait, so Styx, you disagree with this strategy?
Having been in state custody for a number of years and seen their restraint mechanisms, yes, I disagree.
Well, the only other example I could bring up here...
All I can call it is child abuse, actually.
No, I see.
It's child abuse.
Is where I think that you have to balance evils. So having
I don't think you should deliver any evil towards a child.
Balanced
under any circumstances, unless if they're trying to kill somebody or something like that. Yes. Otherwise,
but that's what I would say. That's actually exactly what I would say. So let's say that we have a student, because we see these videos on Twitter and X all the time, where you have a student who's popping off at the teacher. The teacher is 50-year-old white woman with brittle fucking bones. And then the student gets in her face, calls her a fucking honky piece of shit, shoves her into the wall. And then she basically gets the shit kicked out of her.
Of course.
What's that?
That's a little bit different.
Well, right. But what I'm saying is, you don't need a veteran or a law enforcement officer to show up and then beat the fuck out of the kid. You just need a veteran administrator who comes to the class and says, "Mr. Jones, shut the fuck up and sit down or I'm taking you to the office. And then the kid starts popping off and he says, okay, you're coming with me. He grabs him above the elbow, he grabs him by the wrist, and he escorts him to the office. That's it. And I'm telling you, a few 6'4", 200-pound men escorting disruptive students to the office without injuring them would completely change the culture of some of these schools.
Sounds awfully expensive.
I don't think so at all. I think you could pay these people $50,000 a year and they wouldn't give a fuck.
Now, I don't know if this is correct or not as far as, I wasn't there at the time. But from the things that I was reading about after the Civil War, where you had a lot of these black communities that had their own villages, they had their own schools, it was very, very religious. It was very, very hard. And in a way, they knew that, yes, we have to apply this certain amount of pressure, much like there was a, what do you call it? What's that school? The one, not the public school, but the voucher. What's that one called?
Charter schools.
Charter school, thank you. There was a charter school in New York City where a lot of these kids were doing push-ups all the time. They were just like, as they're going through the hall, okay, stop, do push-ups now, and they were doing push-ups. And the way you could say, all right, maybe for yourself, Styx, that wouldn't be something that you would want to do, but there are different cultures out there, right? And maybe there are some cultures who have so much energy inside of them. They love watching Dragon Ball Z. They imagine themselves like Goku or Piccolo more, but they need that energy to be expressed in a productive way, in a way that aims higher than just being with like the hose. And
I love
pimps
freedom
and all
enough. I love freedom enough to have a Styx school and a Counterpoint school, okay? Styx can have the students where there's just like, listen, bud, please stop, stop beating up the teacher, whatever. And then I'll have my school where we'll have former drill instructors saying, shut the fuck up and give me 20 push-ups or I'm escorting you to the office. And we'll let the parents choose which school they want to go to.
No, Styx will have a school where we try to get the students interested in their learning and tailor it appropriately.
I'll take the dickhead students then.
That may start from an earlier age. I mean, that's the other thing we haven't really talked about here. Like, at what age students are already so worked.
And get them interested in various books, various endeavors, and so forth, and tailor the education to them. The problem with our education system is that it's cookie cutter, and so we're trying to get every single student to be interested in every single subject. He can't do that. Like, I don't give a fuck about math. I don't care. I love science. I love history. I certainly love linguistics, but I really don't care about math. And I really don't care about physics or something like that. I want to study biology and soil science and stuff like that. So if you give me a course in those things, I'm going to excel. If you give me a course in something that I'm totally uninterested in, I'm not going to excel. I'll get a D, maybe a Mercy D or something like that.
We have an industrial model. I think we all agree that we have an industrial model that is fairly cookie cutter. I still think that you should be literate. You should still know some things about math, right? Now, do you need to be doing calculus? Do you need to be doing statistics? Probably not, right? So that's where I would say, we were talking about the tiers of like 1, 2, 3, like performing at the high level, performing at the mid, performing at the low. What I would basically say is maybe that should be expanded where certain classes are also 1, 2, 3, high, low, mid, because then you could opt into the class where you're like, listen, I just need a basic mathematics education. I just need to know how to do arithmetic. And I don't give a shit about all that higher level stuff, but I want to know biology and soil science by the time I graduate high school, right? That'd be dope.
They kind of have that. I don't know if this is in every state, because I know that the states generally do the education
I'm literally trying to think of the word. Magnet?
Yeah, here we have like in here where I went to high school, you had the basic classes, the general classes. That's the lower level. Then you had the college prep classes, and then you had like honors and AP. And they're trying to eliminate the AP classes in some states, like Washington State and Oregon, I believe.
Oh,
they're trying to get rid of it. It's like, okay, so you've got a high functioning student, obviously. They're qualified. They probably can run a nuclear reactor or something like that. You're trying to deprive them of college credits. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, You're not going to find me ever. I don't care. Sometimes people, I worked with a Democratic political organization over the last election cycle. So people accuse me of being a paid shill. There is not a dollar amount that you could pay me to get me to endorse the lefty gobbledygook that allows for the elimination of high level courses from education. It's just not going to happen. It's a dumb idea. It's coming out of progressive woke bullshit. It's dumb.
Now, before we get to super chats, I want to make sure we do not skip over the Trump question, because even if you guys agree on a lot, I don't think, Connor, you're going to come out of this stream now, like wearing the MAGA hat. So what would you say are the big things that are separating you from being part of the MAGA movement? And I know you mentioned a couple of them, but anything that you would find particularly contentious with somebody such as Styx here?
Yeah, sure. So I'll actually do a little bit of a summary. So I think that his tweet from 2022, basically saying that we could suspend the Constitution as long as there was fraud, I think that that is like almost an unforgivable sin. And if MAGA wanted to earn my respect, they should prove the electoral fraud of 2020, which they don't seem to have any interest in doing. I think that when it comes to the deportation of citizens, you can say, oh, we broke a few eggs, but if you look at mass immigration, there's far more eggs broken by our broken system as is. I don't think that you need to violate the rights of otherwise decent human beings in order to do it. There are asylum seekers who are being treated as illegal immigrants. There are students who are being treated as illegal immigrants, and they're also being treated as enemies of the state and being deported to places that will either hurt them or kill them. And I think that's unacceptable. When it comes to Trump's authoritarian stuff, I don't know if Styx will agree with this thing, but I do think of him in the house cat analogy, where the only reason why he's not destroying the United States of America and running for a third term is because he doesn't have the power to do so. I think he is an authoritarian who would do worse if he could. He just can't. And then I guess my final point is that we have, through the elimination of USAID, through our negotiations with Ukraine and Russia, through our attempts at Greenland, it's not just cute and funny and good memes. We have killed people that did not need to die as a result of this administration. And this has been a great conversation. But if you catch me on a different day and you say some wild shit, I'll start cussing about it and saying some slurs about it because it genuinely gets me pissed off.
You got the floor, Styx.
I would say I don't recall the U.S. military killing any Greenlanders. That's first and foremost. I do believe in deporting people that are illegally in the country. I think there's a strict hierarchy with regards to that. Cartel member, militant, or something like that, you're high on the list. You're attending college, maybe you join the U.S. military, the only sin that you've committed is that you're illegally in the country. I would defer. I would just ignore that for now. And so on that, I think that I generally agree with Counterpoints here. As far as everything else, I think generally speaking, the Trump administration, while authoritarian, as every administration has been for the last 100 years, is less authoritarian than most of the other administrations in that time period. We have a 10-to-1 deregulation scheme. That is that for every new regulation, 10 others are deactivated. That's good. We have an additional attempt at tax relief. We have an additional attempt at border control, which is something we desperately need because then all of these other things that we've been talking about actually for most of this live stream, they would no longer be issues at all because there wouldn't be enough illegals in the country to justify even having a conversation about it. I'm hopeful that the Trump administration will not cause any additional wars. I believe that probably they will be successful in so doing. And so generally speaking, I'm in support of the Trump administration. Now, I'm not in 100% support. Trump is not God Emperor, and everyone out there watching this needs to know this. Donald Trump is not your God Emperor. He is not going to magically solve all of your problems. But he is attempting to solve as many problems as he can, number one. And properly aided will be able to solve many of them, number two. he is making an attempt. This is already more than we can say for most of the past presidents over the last half century. And for that alone, he deserves credit. He deserves praise.
Annoyingly reasonable.
There we go. Yeah, I know. I'm kind of in between the two of you guys because I see a lot of this incompetence that's coming from the admin. I, being a really, really big supporter of Ukraine, not even for the sake of Ukraine, but for the sake of not wanting Russia that's de facto owned by China in terms of the amount of territory that they have over there in Siberia and the political influence. I don't want there to become like, well, Styx, you were talking about this tripolar order or whatever. I don't want there to be a situation where we have a lot more Gavin Newsoms in the United States who are now influenced by the soft power, not just of China, but of a China that now rules over a section of Eastern Europe through Russia acting as the initial enforcer. Because honestly, I think a lot of these countries are pussies. I don't believe that Article 5 of NATO is more than a piece of paper when a lot of the people in Western Europe are going to think, why should we risk our lives for World War III with Russia? You know, like, who cares about Poland? Who cares about the Baltics? You know, let Russia have it. So I see that as being an incredibly horrible situation if we let go of things. And I was talking to people like Steve Bannon's number 2 guy, Vishbura, on a stream recently about this, where his whole point was, all right, guys, if you want to convince Bannon and like the Trump people of what you're talking about, you have to show us that a Russia being excised from China's influence is a fool's errand. That's what he said. And that, I think, is an important thing to point out. I mean, this is a whole different stream. I don't really want to focus on... We focused on Ukraine too much on BTR as it is. I think a lot of people are already tired right now. I need to give them a little bit of a break. But point being, I'm looking at this strictly, just so you know, Styx, from a Machiavellian lens. Nothing about morality, nothing even about Bucha and the horrible things that Russia did there. Strictly from an American first, not wanting the worst thing to happen sense. And this is why I'm not really liking this very naive attitude of the Trump administration when it comes to Russia, because I think that they just see them as, oh, they're reasonable people, we could strike some kind of a deal. I'm hoping that this is all just some 7D backgammon going on, and later on when they, when Russia makes its move, now Trump will have like full authority to, strike against that. I don't know what's going to happen here, but we do have to go to super chats right now. Any thoughts on what I said before we go to the super chats?
I'm with you, but I am very skeptical of the 7D chess thing.
Backgammon.
Yeah, if anything, the signal leaks showed that these people are exactly who they say they are, which well-intended maybe, but dumb in some cases.
Styx, any thoughts on that?
No particular thoughts, no.
Alrighty, we are going to go to Super Chat then. Here is from Jim, $2. Make America straight again. So there we go. That's what Jim has to say for the $2. Next we have the Dashing Rogue. It's just normal talking points. JD and Trump have been hijacked by the Eurasianists. Nationalism is not synonymous with isolationism. Oh, that's speak of the devil. I mean, that's just what I was talking about right there. Next we have over here Bastiat, $5. Bring me on. I worked for Trump. Not is so dead wrong about everything, and I love Connor, but his TDS is S tier. Didn't they arrest a guy for like child abuse who was one of the sponsors of making TDS like an official diagnosis? You know
I wouldn't be surprised. The main thing that I have here, so the reason why I've appreciated Styx during this conversation, you haven't seen me like jumping at him like a frenzied monster, is because he always caveats his support of Trump with some level of reality. I think that there's a whole different category of Trump supporter that effectively have TDS in the opposite direction, like Trump dick sucking syndrome, where the man can do no wrong. And so, no, I reject
totally
it.
right.
But I will be live 35 hours a week. So, Bastiat, if you want to hit me up directly, we can have a chat about it.
Wait, is that the Bastiat who I had?
I very much doubt the liberal Bastiat is a fan of Trump. Very much doubt it.
Talk about a
Counterpoints is
turnaround.
completely right. There are some people like myself that support Trump generally speaking, but we're willing to criticize him if he does something that we think that is wrong. But then there are other people that are like, oh no, Donald Trump shit in a hooker's mouth? Oh, well, here's the top 10 reasons why
Amazing.
that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, maybe Trump's a little bit fat and the hooker is skinny, so he wants to get some of
Wanted
that
to give her some food.
probiotics.
It was
a
part of his
thoughtful
new
man.
composting program, you know?
Yeah, exactly. No, that like the probiotics from like the fecal matter of skinny people, allegedly that's okay. I'm not gonna get into that, but
Too
anyway.
much shit. All right.
All right, here we go. Next one from the Dashing Rogue. Speaking of God Emperor, it'll be interesting to see the news of Trump fighting Chaos RU. I don't know what he meant by that. Fortunately, the Eternal Champions won't let this happen. What is Dashing Rogue talking about here?
It feels like a 40K reference, doesn't it?
Well,
I
RU
guess-
would usually mean Russia.
Russia, yeah.
Right. So is he calling that there's gods of chaos in Russia? Speaking of God Emperor, it'll be interesting to see the news of Trump fighting the only way that I could read that is basically that there is news that's breaking today that Trump is pissed at Putin, that he hasn't come to the table more aggressively, that he hasn't been as conciliatory. And so the whole thing where I think initially the Trump admin was frustrated with Zelensky because he didn't seem particularly compromising. I think they were hoping to go to Putin and find more common ground, and it didn't happen. So that could be a reference.
Interesting. Over here we have for $5 Alamandorius, who I recognize from Styx's live stream, of course. The No Child Left Behind thing doesn't elevate the underachieving students. It pulls down the high achievers, similar what communism does to economy.
I want to rebut that. So the No Child Left Behind is actually a policy from the George W. Bush era, and liberals and progressives absolutely hated it because what it meant was schools were evaluated based on performance, and then if they had poor performance for 2 or 3 consecutive years, they didn't move the kids, although school choice is a part of conservative politics, obviously. What they did is they broke up the administration. And they broke up the administration repeatedly until they had a high functioning school. And NPR, a decade later, admitted that breaking up toxic school administrations had positive results on like hundreds, if not thousands of communities across the country. And so all of the criticisms of public education are there. I'm not going to deny them, but pretending that it's like a total lost cause and little black kids are just destined to be gangbanging murderers, it's not true.
Yo.
Yo, motherfucker. All right, so before I get to this other super chat over here, I just wanted to remind all the people who are listening to this on Twitter Spaces, X Spaces, or whatever. You see the Jumbotron over here where it says go to YouTube? Why haven't you done that yet? Go to YouTube. You could see our handsome faces on the screen, and the audio is much better. So this Spaces is just a funnel to bring people to YouTube and smash that subscribe button and the like button and also the bell. Very important, the bell. We got to have more bell ringing over here. And guys, once again, patreon.com/breaktherules. And now with this super chat, very appropriate, Jim 199, can someone get Styx a coffee? Yes, I can. And not just any coffee, but Jam and Bean Coffee Company over here. There we are, baby. So if you guys want to support Styx, I know Styx, you have your own code words. So do I. If you type in BTR at checkout, you are going to get some of the most delicious coffee. And you know this, Styx. 10% off, free shipping, all of that. And now we're thinking about the name for the BTR blend. Maybe BTR blend, I don't know. But they've sent me all these coffees.
You get your own blend too?
Yeah, baby,
Styx,
that's right.
Are you stateside? Where are you now these days?
Vermont.
I'm in Vermont.
Yeah.
You're in Vermont? And then are you from someplace else originally, or are you...
No, I was born in New Hampshire, but I've spent most of my life in Vermont, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. I think I think your aesthetic is so Norwegian that I literally mixed you up with a different person. And I was like, oh yeah, Styx is from Norway. He's got a great accent.
Oh man! So once again, BTR 10. If you type in BTR 10, you are going to get very delicious coffee at Jam and Bean counterpoints.com. Go there now. Here, I'm posting it in the chat for everybody. And we are going to work out the blend hopefully soon. I just have to drink all the coffees and tell them which coffee I like the best. And it's a big problem because I already drink too much coffee as it is, and I'm not going to be able to go to sleep. But I have to do this test. Probably, Styx, you went through the same trials as they're bringing me through right now. Anyway, to end with the last super chat over here, we have from another clanker, Copium Poppies. I remember Copium Poppies for $5. Howdy. Our first EP is coming out on Tuesday, and we have a teaser out for it as well as a couple of music videos. Copiumpoppies.com. I like how we always have to try to get around the algorithm of YouTube when doing super chats for links. You know, we have to write like dot as like DAUGHT and com as CALM. So, you know, the struggle is real. So with that, before we go, Discord, there is a Discord server that BTR has. I'm sure there's a lot of Discord heads watching this in the audience. Go to the Discord, support the show, patreon.com/breaktherules. Any final thoughts, guys, on the conversation? Because I want to make sure everything is said that has not been said yet. So let's start with... I
would just like to say thank you, Counterpoints, for coming on here and talking with me. It was a pleasure to talk with you. I think that it was difficult to debate because 90% of our points, I think, were basically identical. So, yeah, pretty much. And, pretty good content creation. So we'll continue.
Yeah, we'll have to find something that we viciously disagree on. So I have pretty passionate arguments for why I'm not MAGA, but I'm not gonna scream and spurg at someone who's like, I believe this, but here's why. Here's my caveat. That's not the kind of person that I'm going to scream at, right? The person that I'm going to scream at is going to be like, Emperor Trump is God. He pooped in a hooker's mouth. It was amazing. Shut up. Like that. That's the person I'm going to yell at. I would say to Creekside. So I just checked out Twitter real quick. Creekside is somebody who said I was full of terrible ideas. Listen, I might use hyperbolic language on occasion, but I do think that legitimately having masculine mentors within public schools could be very positive in order to avoid violence against teachers. And I also think that there is a way that you can restrict and control somebody without physically injuring them. I am serious about that. I'm not being hyperbolic. If you're curious about what I'm talking about, then I recommend you check out Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a martial art that you can break somebody's arm if you feel like it, but you can also just restrain them and not hurt them. And so, that's all I would recommend to Creekside on Twitter.
We're going to have to get into a debate about culinary things or something like that.
Sure. I'm a terrible cook, so that'll be easy.
How do you take your steak?
How do I take my steak? Medium rare.
Yes. Okay.
What about pizza?
You are an ally of me.
Yeah, pizza, I'm a little bit more contentious. And I do use A1 steak sauce for steak. A lot of people hate me for that because they think it's ketchup, but I love it. And then pizza, I'm a little bit more contentious. Banana peppers, pineapples, chicken, and bacon with a pesto base.
Okay, perfectly acceptable. Okay, we can't debate about...
dang it.
No, this is going to be too hard. All right, guys. With that, I want to thank everybody for being here. Be sure to, again, smash that subscribe button, like, patreon.com/breaktherules. This Thursday, Jason Resiger Johnny, we're going to have a Patreon exclusive live stream. You're going to see a YouTube link, but all that YouTube link is at the end of the day is just a way to bring people into patreon.com/breaktherules. So what I want you guys to do right now is to go to patreon.com/breaktherules. Make sure you're there when you're going to see the Giorgiani thing pop up after that. It's going to be even easier for you to do that. With that being said, what are you guys working on now? Where can people find you? And then we're going to end the show. So let's start with Counterpoints.
Yeah, my name's Counterpoints. I have a moderately successful Warhammer channel. If you go to Counterpoints 40K, broke 100,000 subs. I make an okay amount of money off of it. It's a great channel. We basically break down all the videos that come out related to Warhammer and Warhammer 40,000. Right now, I will be launching Counterpoints, which will just be a standalone political project. I'll be live 35 hours a week on something called Valor Media Network. It's an offshoot of Midas Touch, who I know are a bunch of filthy liberals and all that kind of stuff. But
Styx debated a guy from there.
Yeah, but it's around the concept is around positive masculinity, veterans, cops, EMTs, firefighters, talking about their experiences, trying to show men the way, that kind of thing. And
Nice.
we'll be talking about politics, red pill, and current events and news 35 hours a week on the Valor Media Network and Counterpoints. So if you want to come check us out there, please do so.
My favorite comment of the day from the great Black Jesus Christ, deport Lev to Israel. So there we have it. Yes, I'm sure I will. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, share.
Styx has to shout himself out, even though everybody knows who he is.
Styx. Yeah, Styx. Are you working on anything? What's the matter with me?
I'm Styx Saxon Hammer 666. Cross-platform.
And also a great writer of books as well. People could buy your books.
Yes, absolutely. Edited works. Links in the description. Cross video.
There we go. And everybody watching on Spaces, be sure to click on YouTube so you guys could watch us there. Guys, thank you so much. Take care. Mwah. Wishing everybody a good night.
I'll salute you instead of kissing you.
There we go. That's about all.